echo through granite and gold. My heart keeps a cadence older than stories told. Sands of the secret drum call me back to where I'm from. Rhythm in the hieroglyphs speaks in a tongue of fingertips. Under the stars I come, closer, closer to the ancient hum. Every beat I become. Signs of the secret drum.
Prologue. What is handed forward. My father began to fade before he began to speak of leaving. At first, it was only a weariness that lingered longer than it should have. Then came the quiet shortening of breath, the pauses between words that once came easily. My mother knew before any of us named it. When my father grew weak, my mother did not treat his illness as something to be fought, but as something to be accompanied. That was the way of Kemet. She kept him at home, not removed or hidden, placing his bed where light could reach him in the morning, and lamps could be set nearby at night. She washed his body gently with warm water mixed with natron to help him remain at ease within himself. She anointed his skin with oils infused with frankincense and myrrh, both for comfort and for the quiet steadiness they bring to the breath. She tried to ease his pain with poultices of honey and herbs, but she did not insist on cures when she felt his ka, his life force, was already turning inward. She sat with him often, sometimes in silence, sometimes reciting hymns softly. I sat with them sometimes too, holding my father's hand and kissing his forehead. In Kemet, the dying was not rushed away from the living. They were guided gradually toward stillness. My mother reminded him of his Ren, the name that carried his essence. She reminded him of his good deeds, of the order he had lived by, so that his Ib, his heart, would remain light and undisturbed. One evening, as the lamps were being lit, he asked for me. He laid propped against folded linen, his face thinner but clear, his eyes still attentive. Beside him were the scrolls, bound simply, the papyrus softened by years of touch. He placed them into my hands with care, as if weight mattered less than intention. These are not instruction, he told me. They are not law. They are what I witnessed, where I stood rightly and where I faltered. You are my first daughter, and I want to hand my experience to you, wishing it could give you some understanding and guidance, so you may one day continue the work your mother and I had started, and like us, live by Ma'at, by truth and justice, and spread it across the lands. I wanted to tell him I was not ready. Instead, I nodded. Some promises are not made with words. In the days after he got weaker, my mother did not leave his side. Food was offered in small portions, more symbolic than sustaining, and water was placed near him even when he no longer drank, honoring the body until the very end. When his breathing slowed, my mother did not call others to intervene. She placed her hand on his chest and stayed there, steady, until he crossed. In this way, she cared for him not only as a wife, but as one who understood that dying, like birth, is a sacred threshold, meant to be met with presence, dignity, and love, rather than resistance. After he transitioned to the underworld, she allowed her tears to flood her being, even though she stayed calm. Her tears were a testimony of her deep love for him. The priests prepared his sacred body according to the ways of our people. They washed it with water and oils for purification. The process of preserving his sacred body, took 70 days. The organs most vulnerable to decay were removed and preserved separately in canopic jars, each protected by divine guardians. His body was covered and packed with natron, a natural salt mixture, for about 40 days. This stage was done to stop the decaying of the body, the vessel of the Ka, the life force, and transformed the body from something perishable into something enduring. After drying, the body was washed again, anointed with oils, resins, and perfumes, and restored to shape. Wrapped in many layers with clean linen, his heart left where it belonged. My mother made sure to place amulets between layers and recited his name repeatedly, so it would remain among us. My mother stood through it all, steady in her grief. She did not resist the work of farewell, but sought strength in reciting hymns, especially the ones that my father loved. A priest performed the opening of the mouth ritual to stimulate the Ka's senses for the afterlife. Sacred words were spoken, and I was assured that my father could now see, hear, speak, and receive our offerings, and I felt the words have activated the Ankh, the luminous, effective being. I could almost see him smiling and whispering to me from the underworld, Mary Sat, which in our language meant, my beloved daughter. His Sa, the sacred mummified body, was placed in a coffin, within multiple coffins. We all accompanied his Sa to the western side of Hapi, the Nile River, where he would be buried, where the land holds memory without clinging. The prayers were quiet to keep the balance intact, asking that truth remain light enough to carry him forward.
Morning came, as it must. My mother withdrew without disappearing. She wore her sorrow with dignity, letting it be seen without letting it rule. My brothers and sister learned new silences. The house learned them too. Time did what it always does. It did not heal the loss, but it made space around it. It was after the season turned that I returned to the scrolls. I opened them slowly and started to read.
Were the first scroll. Before I was known. My name is Sheshi. I came to Kemet not as spoil of war, nor as a captive taken by the people of Kemet, but as the possession of a man from Sharuhen, a man who shared my tongue and yet never spoke to my soul. My master, like me, raised on dry hills where the soil gives sparingly, and each man were fighting against his neighbor. I learned many things in whispered tales and the careful watching of men older than I. One spoke of Seletus, a leader from our own lands of the west, a man who had swept into Lower Kemet in the north like a storm, claiming cities and making them his own. They said he had founded the city he called Avaris as his capital, planting his rule at the mouth of Hapi, where the river poured its wealth into the Ta Mehet, the rich land of North Kemet. My master, ambitious as ever, had been granted land in a city called Menefer on the west bank of Hapi because he was a relative of the current king of Avaris, Neb-Fau-Ra, the one who besieged Ra, God, whose original name was Yaqub Har, but he changed his name later to one of Kemet's names, claiming to be Neb, beloved of God, to give himself legitimacy to rule Lower Kemet. Menefer was not far from the border where the rule of my land pressed against the older order of the people of Kemet. The people of Kemet were the natives who managed to maintain their rulership over the south. Menefer was a place of uneasy meetings where traders and soldiers, foreigners and natives walked side by side, and the river carried both commerce and suspicion. I worked there, carrying mud and water, feeling the weight of two worlds pressing on my shoulders. The world my master sought to claim, and the one that had belonged to the people of Kemet since memory began. I was brought with my master to Menefer, counted among his tools. Sharuhen, where I came from, was a land of struggle. Its fields were thin, its rains uncertain, its villages built for endurance rather than grace. Our gods were many, were invoked in fear more than in adoration. In Sharuhen, we lived among many tribes who bowed to many faces of the unseen. Each land carried its own god as it carried its water. In Sharuhen and the northern hills, the people called upon El, the old father who sat above all, slow to move, yet heavy with judgment. In the lowlands and storm-washed plains, men shouted the name of Baal-Hadad, rider of clouds, bringer of rain and war, whose strength rose and fell with the seasons. Along the coasts and fertile valleys, women poured oil for Asherah, mother of life and womb of the earth, while warriors sharpened blades for Anat, fierce and blood-bright, who loved battle as others love song. In grain cities nearer the sea, Dagon was honored for bread and abundance, and in whispered fear men spoke of Mot, the devourer, and Yam, the untamed sea. These gods did not bind us together, they divided us. Cities rose against cities, Sharuhen against Shechem, hill against valley, north against south. Kings raided one another's fields, burned storehouses, stole cattle and sons. I remember the stories of wars that never truly ended, only slept alliances breaking, blood debts carried across generations, the strong preying on the hungry. In Sharuhen and its surrounding cities, the land was narrow, and so were men's hearts, and every god demanded loyalty at the edge of a blade. In Sharuhen, survival itself was the measure of worth, and hardship passed for strength. Kemet was another world entirely. The land of black soil breathed harmony. The river arrived as promised, withdrew without cruelty, and returned without resentment. The people of Kemet lived by sacred rhythm, days, seasons, words, and gestures woven into a single order they called Ma'at. Even the poor participated in rites that gave meaning to labor and dignity to repetition. Here, work was not merely endured, it was placed within a cosmos that remembered why it existed. I felt the distance between these worlds inside my own chest. My master prospered quickly under Pharaoh rule and favor. He learned when to wear the customs of the people of Kemet and when to discard them. He praised their order while mocking their devotion, borrowing their discipline but refusing their restraint. To the people of Kemet, he was a Hekau Kasut, a foreign ruler tolerated by circumstance, and to the people of Sharuhen and Avaris, he was a man who had risen, but to me he was a hand that struck with anger. I worked where he sent me. In the fields I cut canals and turned soil thick with promise that would never feed me enough. In construction I carried mud brick and stone, raising walls and storehouses that enriched him, not me. My body learned the measurements of Kemet before my mind could grasp its wisdom. My hands hardened while my thoughts grew sharper. He fed me little, watched me closely, and corrected me often with blows. He believed suffering refined obedience. I learned instead that cruelty needs no foreign tongue. It travels easily from Sharuhen into the ordered heart of Kemet. The people of Kemet called us Hekau Kasut, rulers of foreign lands. At first I thought it an honor, a recognition of power. Later I understood it was a boundary drawn with words. It marked us as those who came from elsewhere, who governed without belonging, who stood inside Kemet, yet never fully knew its soul. To be from the Heku Kasut was to be watched cautiously. I stood between worlds, the world of Sharuhen by birth, laboring in Kemet, owned by a man who shared my blood yet denied my humanity. I silently observed how the people in Kemet were preserving balance through gesture, silence, and restraint. I saw my master laugh at their rites and secretly fear them. At night, when pain kept sleep distant, I listened to temple chants drifting across the dark. I loved the chanting as it brought to me a sense of peace. Slowly, as I learned to speak the language of the people of Kemet, I understood that their words spoke of balance, of right measure, of a world sustained not by force, but by alignment. I wondered how such a land could tolerate men like my master, and how such truth could coexist with my chains. That was when I understood. Kemet was not simply a land of freedom. It was a land where freedom can be remembered, even when men violated it. I speak now not as a scribe, but as a witness shaped by two worlds, one wandering and poor, the other rooted and ordered. I was enslaved by my own people in a land that taught me what dignity and freedom could look like. History will remember the Heku Kasut, the rise and the fall, the names of rulers and cities. It will not remember me, Sheshi, who carried stone by day and questions by night. So I speak, before silence completes its work.
When I finished the first scroll of my father's memoir, I did not close the scroll at once. I held it open in my hands, my father's words still warm in me, and felt something I had not expected, grief arriving late. Tears streamed from my eyes. I had always known my father as steady, as chosen, as one who carried the order of Ma'at, that is, truth and justice, without raising his voice. But to read, in his own hand, my name was Sheshi, and to know that this name had once been spoken over a body owned by another, this struck me deeper than any tale of danger. My father had been literally a slave, not in story, not in metaphor, but in flesh, brought from a foreign land not by choice, but by one of his own people claiming ownership over him. How could that happen? I cannot bear the thought that he could have been tortured, humiliated, measured, silenced, bought and sold. Yet I grew up knowing my father as a free man. When was he freed, and how? I knew he was not born in Kemet, yet he embodied its spirit fully. I never felt he was bitter, and he never claimed virtue from suffering. That restraint hurt more than anger would have. It made his resilience visible, and it made my chest ache with the weight of what had been carried quietly so that I might be born into freedom and stability. I thought then of the occupied land in the north to this day. I thought of those still held now under the rule of a Pepi, the tyrant who is still enslaving people. Of families whose names are spoken carefully or not at all. I thought of others still bound by fear, if not always by chain. The ache I felt did not stay in memory. It pressed into the present. What my father had survived was not finished history. It was ongoing wound. I realized then that the resistance I had grown up witnessing, walking beside my parents, listening more than speaking, had never truly been a choice for me. It had been a continuation. But now it deepened. It took on weight. Reading my father's beginning placed my own feet more firmly on the ground. Reading my father's words that night, I felt the two streams meet, the personal and the political, the inward and the historical. My father had carried the order of Ma'at, quietly helping those in need, while Sekenenre Tao, our current leader, carried her in open defiance. Both are necessary. And now, what would be my role? I closed the scroll then and placed my hand upon it. I knew that my commitment was no longer inherited, it was now chosen. Chosen with awareness of possible cost that I saw many people pay. Chosen with memory sharpened by pain. I would follow the guidance of the resistance not because it was noble, but because it was required by those still captive, by those who had fallen under occupation, by those yet to be born into a land that deserved wholeness. My father had written his beginning. I would help write what came after. Until Kemet was no longer occupied, divided, and ruled by fear, and until the order of Ma'at, unburdened by silence, and spread from south to north, carried by those who remembered what it costs to forget. After a few days of grieving, I decided to open my father's memoir again, as I desired to know what gave him strength, patience, and steadiness that I grew up witnessing.
In the next episode, Sheshi and Nini started to secretly meet in the sacred library called Per Ankh, or the House of Life, in ancient Egypt. Subscribe to our channel to know what happens next.
Who taught my hands this pattern? Who caught pulse in my blood? Is it the river still singing? Is it the desert in flood? Sands of the secret drum. Call me back to where I'm from. Rhythm in the hieroglyphs. Speaks in a tongue on my fingertips. Under the stars I come. Closer, closer to the ancient hum. Every beat I become. Sands of the secret drum.